You and your friends are coming to the latest information, the most notable current events on the YouTube channel of Nghe An Newspaper, the digital infrastructure of Nghe An Newspaper and radio and television. To know what the program is about today, please follow along below. On September 24, Ukrainian drones and boats attacked the Russian port city of Novorossiysk, killing at least 2 people and injuring 3 others. RT quoted Veniamin Konrativ, governor of Russia's Krasnodar region, as describing the attack by Ukrainian drones at midday on September 24 as horrifying. Konrativ said the attack damaged the Novorossiysk hotel, located about 2 kilometers from the port of Novorossiysk, and 5 nearby buildings. In a post on his Telegram channel, the governor of the Krasnodar region wrote, "Unfortunately, due to the deaths, the city of Novorossiysk on the Black Sea coast has become an important base for the Russian Black Sea Fleet. The importance of this facility has increased after Ukrainian UAVs repeatedly targeted Russia." Videos released by Russian media showed students hiding in a school hallway while footage from witnesses appeared to capture the USV approaching the city. Another video showed at least 4 cars on fire. According to the short channel, Russian defense forces destroyed at least 5 Ukrainian USVs near the coast. The attack by KF forces also damaged the offices of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium under the Russian-Kazakhstan joint venture and several foreign energy companies such as mining giant Chevron and ExxonMobil. Local media reported that at least 3 people were trapped in the basement of a building and that forces emergency forces to rescue them. Ukraine has not yet commented on the attack. However, according to a source in the Kyiv Independent, on February 24, Ukrainian security service UAVs once again attacked the Gazprom Neptune Salavat petrochemical plant in the Russian Republic of Bashkortostan. The Gazprom Neptune Salavat plant is one of Russia's largest petrochemical facilities, producing 150 different products including gasoline and diesel. The plant is located about 1,300 kilometers from the Ukrainian front line. U.S. President Donald Trump's sanctions on India for buying Russian oil are pushing billionaire Mukesh Ambani's business empire into a diplomatic crisis. A few months ago, when U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that some of India's richest families were benefiting from the conflict in Ukraine, he did not name anyone. However, in India, it was widely understood that the minister was referring to billionaire Mukesh Ambani. Ambani is not only India's richest man but also Asia's richest man with an estimated net worth of over $100 billion. His conglomerate Rylan Industries touches almost every aspect of Indian life. The crown jewel of the empire is the crude oil refining industry that meets India's growing energy needs and exports around the world. In recent years, RAN has stepped up purchases of Russian crude at discounted prices, bringing huge benefits to Mr. Ambani and becoming a lifeline for Russia when it was isolated by the West. Now, with President Donald Trump punishing India for buying Russian oil and demanding New Delhi diversify its energy supplies, the billionaire has suddenly found himself at the center of a storm of crisis. The Finland-based Korea Center for Energy and Clean Air recently released analysis showing that Relian Group has bought about $33 billion of crude oil from Russia since the conflict in Ukraine broke out in May 2022, accounting for about 8% of Moscow's total crude oil sales. Korea and Yub analyst Raghu Nandan said that was a huge number for a company. Mr. Tom Keating, director of the Center for Finance and Security at the Royal United Services Institute for Defense and Security Studies, said that much of this money was likely used by Russia in the war in Ukraine. This is also the catch the US has raised when raising tariffs on India for not stopping buying Russian oil. Rylan meanwhile insists that its purchases of Russian oil do not reflect any political stance regarding the conflict and that these transactions have always been in full compliance with all international regulations. Maritime data and vessel information show that since November last year, at least 17 tankers sanctioned by the European Union (EU) or the UK for their links to the Russian energy sector have called at Ransport in Sikh by Gujarat in western India, at the Ramnagar refinery complex not far from ZA port. Rulian turns crude into diazine and gasoline, supplying fuel to India and exporting to Europe and other parts of the world. Cheap crude from Russia has become an increasingly important part of the operations at this facility. Rian does not deny the information but explains that sanctions from the UK and EU have no extraterritorial effect. The company's statement said it does not apply to entities outside the UK or EU. So RAN can absolutely receive oil from such vessels. Data shows that in 2021, before the Russia-Ukraine conflict broke out, RAN bought only about $85 million of oil from Russia. But the following year, the figure skyrocketed to $5.5 billion. Rulian's purchases peaked in 2023 at $11.7 billion and fell to $9.8 billion in 2024. According to calculations by the Washington Boss newspaper, verified by two independent experts, RAND bought $6.2 billion of Russian oil between January 1 and December 12 of this year. This shows RAND's role in Russia's oil export industry, which has helped the country overcome a series of sanctions from the West and maintain the campaign in Ukraine. Last month, President Trump said India's oil purchases were fueling Russia's military machine. He then doubled tariffs on Indian imports to the US to 50%. The Indian government insists its oil purchases are not illegal and notes that US officials have previously encouraged it to buy Russian crude to stabilize global energy prices. In late 2022, in an effort to pressure Moscow, the G7 and EU imposed a price ceiling of $60 a barrel on Russian crude, allowing it to continue circulating but limiting Russian profits. India was then encouraged by its Western allies to take advantage of the low prices to buy Russian oil to help prevent chaos in global markets. In November 2022, then U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said, "We are very happy that India got such a bargain." The Indian Ministry of External Affairs has now criticized the tariffs imposed by President Trump as unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable, asserting that the purchase of Russian oil was based on market factors. U.S. negotiators were in New Delhi last week to push forward stalled trade talks. But the issue of Russian copper remains a major obstacle. U.S. media reported last month that President Trump had made it clear that he would not approve a trade deal with India unless the country cut back on oil purchases from Russia. Neither President Trump nor economic officials have specifically criticized Rylan. However, according to data from ship tracking company Clr, Rulian is the top buyer of Russian oil in India and is likely to maintain that position for years to come. In December 2024, the company signed a deal agreed to buy 500,000 barrels of crude oil per day from Russian state oil giant Rosneft in a deal worth $13 billion a year over 10 years. There is no reason for India to change its oil purchase program unless the West widens sanctions to make such purchases illegal, according to Benjamin Heigenstock, head of macroeconomics research and strategy at the KSE Institute at the KF School of Economics. Rian Group is a giant conglomerate with operations in retail, telecommunications, online entertainment, and consumer finance. However, according to company figures, its oil refining division remains the most prominent, accounting for about 58% of the group's total revenue of $125.3 billion. According to Seller, about 50% of Rylan's crude oil imports as of August this year came from Russia, helping the company significantly boost profits. Financial Times recently reported that since 2022 RAND has earned an additional $6 billion by buying Russian crude at a discount. RAND said India's increased purchases of Russian crude after 2022 have helped stabilize global oil markets and prevent supply shocks. The company said the profiteering allegations were baseless and unfounded. As his fortune has grown thanks to Ivory crude, billionaire Ambani has sought to get closer to President Trump. He hosted Trump's inauguration in May. The two shook hands and spoke briefly at a state dinner hosted by Qatar in May. His daughter Ivanka and her husband Zared were guests at the lavish wedding of Ambani's youngest son last year. According to Fawn magazine, the real estate company of the RAND Group paid $10 million to license the name of the project in Mumbai, although the details of the project remain unclear. Analysts say tensions between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, with the focus now on Russian oil. Billionaire Ambani is increasingly in the U.S.'s crosshairs and is being pushed into a difficult position. At RAND's annual meeting last month, Mr. Ambani seemed to hint at growing tensions. He said nothing changes economic power. This lesson has been reinforced by recent geopolitical developments. India must achieve greater economic power and must do so with a sense of urgency. RAND stressed their primary commitment to the Indian government's policy of promoting the country's energy security through multiple sources of affordable and reliable energy supplies. On May 15, President Trump's chief economic architect, Peter Navarro, made scathing comments about forcing Indian companies to work with Russian refiners in the wake of the conflict in Ukraine, in an apparent attempt to defuse tensions. President Trump called Prime Minister Modi last week to wish him a happy 75th birthday and thank him for his support in an effort to end the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Experts warn that Mr. Trump's strategy of pressuring India to reduce its imports of Russian oil could fail, according to C. Amin, a legal expert at the anti-corruption organization Transparency International. Raising tariffs is a blunt instrument that could potentially harm both the Indian and American economies. Analysts say a more targeted approach, but imposing secondary sanctions on Iran or its refinery in Jamnaga, could be more effective. Mr. Hingenstock said, "If we want billionaire Ambani to stop doing this, we need to put pressure on Iran. We should not put pressure on someone to do something just because they think it is the right thing to do.